Julia Kelly, and today is January 26th. I keep saying February, Friday, and this is my 10th floss tube. I am a artist. I am a fabric collage artist, a art educator, and a new cross stitch designer. And I don't know what's going on. It's a beautiful sunny day in Colorado. I have cabin fever. I literally live in a cabin on the edge of a canyon. I mean, I have a paved road I'm looking at. But yeah, I'm ready for it to be the weekend and my husband to be home and us to get some piddly work done. And I kind of just kept thinking I would, be more chipper. Is that a word? And kind of held off filming today. I usually do this in the morning, and I have the cabin blues, so this will probably help. Talking to myself, the German Shepherd, Piper, who you will have seen. We went to Santa Fe last weekend, so I have absolutely no excuse for being in a blah. I kind of tweaked my back a little bit. We were driving. This is my excuse. We were driving back from Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and we have to drive across the Navajo Reservation in northern New Mexico. And it was Santa Fe, if you saw the pictures, got about 2 inches of snow. And for them, that's almost, what's it called? Shuts the town down. They're not equipped to handle snow. People don't have four-wheel drives. We do, so it's not an issue for us. I've watched, very bald, tired cars slide into train tracks in Santa Fe because they're just not used to it. But it was pretty snowy, so I had my snow boots on, and we have very good snow boots, but they lace up. And this is my theory, that when we got into the truck, I should have taken the tight lace snow boots off and put on my normal kind of, walking shoes, my track, what do you call them? All-terrain shoes or whatever, but they're more comfortable, and I didn't. So that's my theory, is that my foot was in a weird position, and with this other broken foot, it's just amazing how one part of your body affects the rest of your body. So I've been kind of waddling around, thus the cabin fever. So yeah, I'm getting a little bored, and my German Shepherd is getting a little irritating, and she's sleeping. She was like right behind the chair. But if you saw, she's not abused. She got to go to Santa Fe with us, and we take her everywhere. But if you've ever had a German Shepherd, you just know. So this is Friday, and we did go down to Santa Fe. Our anniversary is coming up, 1st of February. We usually like to go down there for that. We just like excuses to go down to Santa Fe, Albuquerque. But I was on a mission this time, as I've been sharing, because I have wanted to reset my studio. I kind of like to do that more than like make declarations about the year or goals. I kind of just like to get everything organized and kind of back to kind of a cleaner slate to then build off of again. And I do that both literally and digitally. I also am going through my files, my email. I've gotten, I think, 1,000 emails down to like 10 the day that I did it. Just the Duluth Trading Company or Sundance, or the things they think I need 100 emails, and one goal, I guess you would say, because of venturing into this business, is to look at my emails on a daily basis, and instead of cleaning them out once a month or once a week, really trying to pare them down weekly. We'll see how well I do, but I guess that would be more of a goal than a reset. But the reset involved, I shared that I had purchased, kind of as a treat, and I'm kind of really bummed about it, the DMC clear plastic trays for their floss. And they're probably more for like a display tray for like an LNS. But I think they literally came from France, and they're warped. You know, that it's like a metal cube that then you slide these trays into. They're beautiful. Like you can really see that, like you can look in and see what you can see. That's kind of my theme, is clear plastic containers, so I can see what I have. And I, treated myself maybe a year ago. I can't really, I mean, it hasn't been that long. And took a long time to get here. I know they came over from France. But they're warped. And I have, I thought, well, maybe they're backwards, or maybe they're upside down, or maybe, because it's like the grooves are in this metal cube and then you slide these trays in. And then I just played around with them. And then I realized that actually the metal frame, both of them are warped. So it was, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I think that, like, which is a little scary, is the manufacturing that happened like slightly at the end of the pandemic and then kind of when things opened up, I think was subpar. I think that things that usually were really good, you had a chance where you would just, because they were training new people or they were reopening up or because people didn't, we've dealt with I know that's true with computers. My husband and I have had computer issues, and the techs have, my entire motherboard had to be replaced, and it's a COVID laptop, or just after COVID laptop. And they pretty much have admitted to that they're having to kind of deal with issues, like if it was a fine wine, what it would be the end of COVID, I don't know, 2021 or whatever, was not a good year. So for whatever reason, I just was done. Like I thought, I'm not going to just struggle with these things. And the way I work, it just made me frustrated. And I thought, this is ridiculous. So I wanted to get to the Container Store I had looked online, and there were several possibilities, obviously not floss containers, but the Container Store is so ridiculous. They have egg storage and herb storage. I just needed a drawer, So I, strolled around, and our typical thing when we travel with the dog, my husband's very good at working in the car. He has his laptop and he can do his work mobily. So he just hung out they went for a little walk, and I, went to the Container Store and perused these shelves. And there were about 3 or 4 options that would have worked, whether they were trays that I would stack on top of each other, or just different things. But I wanted a drawer. I wanted to pull out for a drawer. And what the funny thing is 3 of them would work. So then I thought, oh, well, I'll just, what's the cheapest option? They all cost exactly the same, and they all were expensive. Like there wasn't an option that was like drastically cheaper. And I think that's just the nature of some things, that they're, it's just, I think a drawer, having something that pulls out that's like a drawer. I was looking in the jewelry department. I was looking in the closet, renovation department. I was looking in the kitchen department, the office supply department. They all pretty much ended up being the same price. So I am going to do instead of trying for me to explain to you and move this over to there, I'm going to, when I'm done with the talking part, right here, I'm going to take the camera and pan it and show you, but I'll stick that in like right here. So, okay. So I wanted to show this corner. There's the start of my computer, my desk, and then this is a corner. And this is how I replaced my floss down here. And this is the chair that I will be getting to next. So down here are my bobbinated colors that are separated by, there's 4 of them now, separated. And there's that box I just showed you. Like I said, it's just right. I can just toss things in it. And there's my youngest daughter as a baby and my oldest daughter as a baby. And they're just the cutest things ever. But yeah, so I divide the floss by Roy G. Bibb's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet in these containers. And then I have a container that are my neutrals and my whites, grays, and blacks. And then then I have the fourth container, and like red and orange, red and yellow kind of share, green and blue. I mean, like they're grouped a little bit. Then the fourth container is actually like I have shared that I like either using for 16 count. I use DMC, Classic Colorworks, Roxy Floss Co., and Gentle Arts. I think the thickness of the actual thread is the same. And as you can see some in there. But I think that then on 18 count, I think it's too thick when you're using 2 strands over 2 or 2 strands over, in Ada. So then I go to Weeks Dye Works and just have discovered Cosmo. I think is a thinner, not as plump, fuzzy thread. So I got these 2 Bisley Container Store filing cabinets. So this is reds minus Weeks and Cosmo. But you can see all my reds, oranges, yellows, greens. So it's Roy G. Biv. And blues and purples. And then over here, I have my grays and my blacks and my whites. And my browns and my neutrals. And then we start with Weeks. And this is the new big purchase I did, Cosmos. So I have orange down, so reds, yellows, and oranges, blues, indigos, violets, and greens, and then my grays, neutrals, blacks, and whites. And this Cosmo is like silk. I don't know. I haven't stitched with silk, but I think it's dang close. It is so soft. I got some 20 count, so I don't know what I'm going to do on 20 count, but I want to do some more of that Cosmo. So that is my organization. Then there's the view. There's my desk. It's kind of messy with my tea and my iced tea and my hot tea. And then out right there, that's Mesa Verde. I don't know if you can hear, but it's melting. We had a huge snowstorm yesterday. I mean, all day long, it was just a winter wonderland. It was coming down. And now it's like it's just melting. And I can hear it. It's just like a drip, 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 drip. But that's not rain. We have pro panel. We have a very steep roof because of our snow load. So it goes off, so it just drips, drips, drips. And occasionally you will get a plop from something big. But saying that, just as a reminder, I have released my Fox in the box, winter Fox in the box. I just have to kind of tip down to make sure I have it in camera. And it comes in a cheese box. And this was my first idea for a Fox in the box, was a wintertime fox, looking at the moon. Oh, we had a full moon 2 nights ago. And this is interesting. My husband is a very brilliant person. He's a very brilliant man. So it's always funny when I know something he doesn't know that's booky. And we were driving home and it was like evening. And I'm like, well, there's the stages, there's a crescent and then there's a half. And I said, but what's the opposite of the crescent? Because, you get 2 halves, you get a crescent, 2 halves, but it's an 8 cycle. And I'll have to I have a moon map that my daughter gave me. It's fun when my kids find moon things to give me. But I was like, well, there's a name for what's opposite of a crescent. So like, a crescent is when you just see a tiny little sliver and then the rest of the moon is dark. There's another name for when you see most of the moon, but then it just has like a little bite out of the side of it. And he didn't even know that there was a name for that. I said, no, I know there is. I used to teach the kids in school it. And I couldn't remember what it was. So we came home. We were driving home. I came in the house. I went right to my studio. I went right to my moon map. And I'm like, it's a Gibson. It's called a Gibson. And he's like, I had no idea. I had no knowledge of that. So there you go. So the opposite of a crescent is a Gibson. So a Gibson moon is like when it almost looks like it's full, but there's like this little weird kind of wedge out of one side of it. But yeah, so this is my winter fox in the box. The second, I have my fall fox in the box, winter fox in the box. This is my quandary with this idea that started before it was a full-fledged idea. I just thought this looked cool. I have other fox ideas that aren't the seasonal that I probably will do something after I get the seed, but I need to get fall, winter, spring, and summer out first. I have one done that is honestly, like, I started to debate this. It's like, when do flowers come out? When spring is dreary, it's muddy, it's the time that people go loopy, because nothing interesting is happening. And then I started to think, I actually, and I might put a picture up here if I can find it. I think it's on my laptop. This idea also started off of, I think I've shared in the past that I did freelance illustration for children's magazines, or tried to do freelance illustration for children's magazines in a time when the magazine industry was folding. My timing has not been great. So I have a fabric collage of foxes that I used as one of my samples that then I would mail off to art directors to show them that I could do animals. And there's a lot of classic fox images. I don't think you'd want to cross stitch. Like the most classic wintertime fox image is, the reason they have such big ears is they can hear the voles and the rodents underneath the snow, and they'll stop and they'll kind of cock their head, and they can zoom in with exactly where they think there's a vole or a rodent, and you'll see them jump and dive straight down in the snow to get their lunch. That probably wouldn't make the best fabric collage illustration or the best cross stitch. We have a fox mama that lives down in the canyon, and she has gotten, if we're not careful, I think she's gotten 2 or 3 of our chickens. So I've looked out my driveway and seen her running away with one of my chickens hanging in her mouth. We built our cabin on a wildlife thoroughfare, so, you can't get mad at her for that. So, yeah, so this is one challenge with doing wild animals is, do I make it a little more whimsical than reality and not have, like, the fox hunting and eating food and taking, chickens away, because that's what they really like to do. So, and spring is just a lot of brown. Like, I thought about, okay, well, maybe a fox's den and maybe baby foxes. But what's really weird is that babies, a lot of times in illustration, are hard because when you decrease the space you have to do information, like to do him any smaller would be a little bit hard. So, so I'm like at a loss for truly a spring fox in the box. But there's plenty of happy, flowering, springy, blooming, ideas. So you might get more of a slightly late spring, one. And then I have one that would be a really good summer one. So just so you know, there's a little challenge there. So, so that's fox in the box. Now remember, I always say this, that I am a heavy user of fractional stitches. And if you see here, the stars sparkling are actually Algerian eyelets. And it is all DMC. I'm keeping the Fox in the Box series just DMC, kind of just as a illustration that, yes, the hand dyed's glorious, everything is beautiful, but but you can certainly do wonderful things with just DMC and then the standard. This is all Aida. I do not, this is Algerian stitching on Aida. And yes, you can do Algerian stitching with Aida. You can do specialty stitches on Aida. Aida actually has some characteristics to it that make it easier. I don't know why that idea got started, but the other thing is, if you'll notice, this blue is not Zweigart. It's actually Winchell. I will put the name here. Because I didn't want a blue. I didn't want a navy. I wanted something that kind of glowed. And Witchlet. And I had to switch to that. I purchased it at an L&S. It's not their fault. It's my fault for not checking gauge. I assumed it was 18 count. And it was actually 16 count. You can fudge it in the pattern. It works. If you truly do stitch this on 18 count, I mean, this is only 2.5, maybe 3 inches by 10 inches. So say you're stitching it and you realize it's not quite matching up. There are many fixes. Just stitching another bit of the snow, stitching, continuing on with a tree, winging a tree on either side, or wrapping some of the stitching around the edge, depending on which way you go. My experience is a 16 to 18 for things this size. You can fudge either way, but this is actually not. And now that I say that, I have to verify that. I need to go back into that chart. And this is interesting. I need to see if I said 18 or 16 on the chart. I can't remember if I fixed it or I need to fix it. I tell you that, I mean, getting the idea, stitching it, finishing it, figuring out the technology, the terminology of all these variables is what is the most challenging thing to me. So I will check and make sure that it's correct. And if it's not correct, I will be fixing it on the chart. The chart is on my Etsy store, which is MF Studio Stitch. And you can always go through my website, which is moonflowerstudio.biz, to get to my Etsy. In that kind of a thing, I was going through all of my social media, which is Moonflower Muse for Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram. On Instagram, if you follow me in the mornings, I usually post even like something I'm designing as a story because they go away, and I did the coolest new spring design close-up of something that if you you might want to look at that in the next couple days. You might see some fun stuff is coming together. But in that process, I realized that years and years ago, I actually started a YouTube channel that I owned that was singular. It was Moonflower Musing. Now I have Moonflower Musings, plural. And I am trying to remember what email I used for that first channel so I can get rid of it. So if you come across that channel and you're like, well, where did all the videos go? It's because it's Musings, plural, instead of just one musing. But because this has fractional stitches, and because I've introduced Algerian stitches, which I was listening to another designer that released some charts this week, and she was reminiscing about when she started to design and how people, her phrase was, hate fractional stitches. I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't stitch on linen. Maybe they're hard on linen. I don't know why they would be. Especially if you're stitching in a hoop. I don't know. I mean, so if you have some opinion, throw it down in the comments. I think I probably will keep doing them. But in my mind, it's like, okay, well, yeah, if you knit, yeah, most people say, oh yeah, purling is harder than knitting. Like, learn how to knit, go do a garter stitch, and then eventually you throw a purl in. You know, to shape anything in knitting, you have to learn, you know, a stitch over or stitch two together or, you know, slip over. You have to, I mean, yeah, you have to have 4 or 5 stitches in your belt to do anything. If you crochet, there's multiple, you know, there's the basics. To shape and knit anything in crochet, you need to know 2 stitches at least, if not 3 or 4. So I don't know. I don't understand why there's an aversion to it, but yeah, but they're not hard. You have to count. You have to pay attention counting. That's probably the thing about fractional stitches, that if you don't pay attention counting and you count a fractional stitch as a whole stitch, that's when you get in trouble. In doing that, because they're new, because there's a stigma about them, along with specialty stitches, and I mean, yeah, you have to learn them, and there's a couple different specialty stitches. Like, I can't instantly tell you how to do, what's a good example? A bullion stitch, like I was using this morning. Yeah, off the top of my head, I have to pause and think. Or if it's something like blanket stitch, that's the one that I always have to go back and look at and go, now, how do you start a blanket stitch? Because I can't quite remember how to start it. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, with the internet and Pinterest, you know, but saying that, because I'm introducing something, you know, different, I designed a freebie, a heart sachet that has, let's see if I get this right. In this heart sachet is fractional stitches, Algerian eyelets, just like the winter fox in the box. If you don't know how to do an Algerian eyelet, and then on the and then the other thing that I do, that I've done, is I don't use back stitch. I use what's called a couching stitch. And a couching stitch is where you have a thread on top and then you're tacking down. You like just run it like you're drawing with it, and you tack as you go. But it's a 2-thread stitch. But I did, so last week I released a playlist, and this has lavender in it. I did a sachet, like if you want to, I haven't talked so much, I can't talk now. This is a cool coffee shop in Santa Fe. Very nice people. But I put lavender in it. So last week I released 7 videos, an intro of making this, a explanation on paper what fractional stitches are, stitching with me fractional stitches, how to stitch fractional stitches and count fractional stitches. And the key to counting fractional stitches is you treat it like music. And if you know any music, they're like they're the accent note. So like it would be and 1, 2, 3 and, or 1, 2, 3, 4 and. So you don't count them in your head as a 1, you count them as an accent. But so I have a video on that. I have a video how to do couching instead of backstitch. I have a video on how to, I have 2 videos on fractional stitches. I have one on how to do the opposite edge of the lace, which is fractional. You can't really see it now. It's more of like an edge thing. And then I have a video on Algerian eyelets, how to stitch Algerian eyelets. And I started to make a video on how to put this together, and it was so bad because I hand stitch everything. I just kind of did it. I thought, sure, there's other sources better for that than me. And then I did another video on how to do this trim on the end, which is a bullion stitch. And which, I mean, obviously this is a scrap out of your, what do you have out of your studio project. But yeah, but that is all up on my, on Moonflower Musings, more than one. Moonflower Musings, in a playlist. The playlist is called Heart Sachet, Fractional Freebie. And the chart is on my website. which is moonflowerstudio.biz, B-I-Z. Go to the cross-stitch pattern page, and you can download a PDF, which I checked yesterday, and for some weird reason it wasn't working, but I think I got it working, so I'll check again to make sure. But yeah, so it's everything you need to know how to make this is in that playlist, and the chart for making it is on my website. So so that's what I have created new. I got to look here at my list here. So I talked to you about Santa Fe. I talked to you about the Winter Fox in the Box, the Heart Sachet. I did get to the Container Store, and I have shown you probably already what I got. I did also, I had this, speaking of what did I just say the word was? Resetting my video. This designing is like interesting to me, because when I do fabric collage, I just pick colors of fabric, colors of thread, use them, stitch with them, embellishments. I just kind of throw everything in one thing. You know, like I have my fabric, yes, but I don't keep track of who manufactured it. I don't know. I mean, you know, sometimes I know, but I usually don't know. My floss cards, like I was sharing before, I have 2 big bags to take to Goodwill of things that I purged that I don't pay attention to the numbers. I might use the same card over and over again, and who knows what that number is. So, so this designing has taken me a little while to get a system. In art, we would call that a workflow. And in illustration, well, what I was doing was just had a pile. Like I'd have the chart, the fabric, the Aida, the pile of thread I was using, and I would just kind of put it somewhere if I started to do something else, with the hope that it would still be there when I would go back, and I would remember, you know, like I wouldn't lose a color. So, but I did get these magazine racks that I put on my wall. I've had one, I have 1, 2, 3, 3, and I got 4 more, so now I have 7 that are on, and I'll show you that in a second. But basically in illustration, what you do when you get a project in, you have your sheet of paper that gives you all the directions, you know, like all the what the client is wanting. And then you start working, and there's a lot of back and forth, you know, sketches and emails. So you just, it's like a work bag that you just put everything in that bag for that project. And I was thinking, like, how do I organize these designs? And I thought, oh, well, the illustration process would work. So I went on Amazon, and I found a very, you know, heavy duty Ziploc that I have down here in my drawer. You know, that is just the size of a sheet of 8.5 by 11. And then I can put, if I design that pattern, but I haven't started stitching it, I can make a copy and put it in here. If I have the whatever I start collecting for that pattern, I can put in here. And then I can slide in, and I'll show a picture of that. And you might see something that's coming up over here. And I don't have piles anymore. So that was a big thing. And just last night, my husband and I put up the 4 that I had gotten. So that's cool. You know, that's one of those little things you don't think is that exciting, but it actually is very exciting. And they were just Amazon, you know, things. So I have that. Talked about that. Eliminate the piles. The other thing I realized is, I think for designing, you have a palette. You know, I have a palette of colors I like. I don't, you know, there's no reason for me to get the entire set, probably of any designer, any floss dyer, or like DMC, or, you know, because there's some colors I don't like. I mean, if you went through that is all of my fabric. From there over, I have 2 bins per color. So red, orange, yellow, everything is Roy G. Biv. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And then down here are felts, Roy G. Bived, or basically blues and greens. So I don't see a reason to get an entire collection of someone, because you just lean naturally towards certain colors that you like, that you will use all the time. I mean, if you looked in like a, an art, like a oil painter's paint box, or a pastel artist, they could tell you their favorites in reds, greens, blues, yellows. So, so that's, you just don't need every single color underneath the rainbow. And when you start picking colors you love, you start to realize, this is a much smaller palette than you think it would be. So, and you'll have seen kind of my color preferences when I show in that clip of me showing you where I'm keeping my floss. But what I realized in these designs, because my palette is limited, like my favorite all-time hands down green is Classic Colorworks Bean Sprout. I probably have used it more in, but then my favorite orange is Gentle Arts Fragrant Cloves. I love Weeks Dye Works Paris Green. I could get 5 of those and just continuously use them. Or Dark Chocolate, which is what Classic Colorworks. So I use them in multiple designs, and so I finally decided I just need to order multiples of those. Like, always have 2 or 3. It's like my mom in the pantry. She always has. She would go get a mayonnaise when she ran out of a mayonnaise and took the last mayonnaise out of the pantry. She would get another mayonnaise. So that's what I'm doing, and I think I've shown this before. This is my system. So this is the 5-pound cheese box, and I do have multiple designs once the Fox series is kind of gone. Well, it will probably never go away because I always have ideas. I have bigger ideas for these. But in here is needs to be put, it's kind of like a roller deco. It's kind of like, putting things away in the library. And what I do is I throw in, when I'm done using something, or like I realize I need another one for another design, I toss in the tags, or I write a note or whatever in here. Here's that gorgeous Paris green from Weeks. And what you'll notice about this is it actually has flecks of brown in it, which I think is really cool. And here's that bean sprout from Classic Colorworks. Okay. Oh, this is so lush. This is Loganberry from Classic Colorworks and Gentle Arts. Yeah, okay. I need to stop. But this is a good system. Like, when I realize I need a color that I need to go on 1, 2, 3 stitch, I will go in here and I will just find everything that is coming up and get some duplicates. Because the system of putting everything in a bag I need to design, I guess it's kind of the same version, modified version of someone who is a multi-project stitcher and has more than one of the same color in different project bags. So, but it's a very typical system to use for illustration, to have a wall with projects and then see-through bags where you can see the different things. Okay. So I'm going down my list here. I have constantly, I actually taped a floss tube a week ago, trying to do this, what I'm about to tell you. And it was 3 hours long. And it got way deeper into humanity than it needed to. And I thought, that's not what the purpose of this channel is. So I'm not going to, I just gave up on that video. But I have said that I wanted to share with you how I was an art teacher for about 15 years down at a one-room schoolhouse that was on the edge of 2 Indian reservations. And a lot of this you see now is because I've taught art for 15 years. Not adults, kiddos. But I had the opportunity to teach very isolated rural ranch kids that live in this, like, you start going towards the Four Corners where you have New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and Utah. You can put your foot in each one, and it's canyon country. We're on the Colorado Plateau. So canyons don't go up, they go down. I grew up in northern Colorado where a canyon was between two mountains. Here you're on the top of plateaus and then you dive down into canyons. But it makes for very isolated areas. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid hid around here before they went to Wyoming in their younger days. It's kind of it's been a place that robbers and people on the fringe and religious zealots, multiple different ones. You always think about Utah, so you always think about Mormons, but there's multiple different other ones hide out, who kind of want to be left alone. So this one room schoolhouse is down into a canyon headed towards Utah, but it happens to be on the edge of what is the Sleeping Ute Mountain Indian tribe. And then right across the border into, New Mexico, but then Utah's like right there too, is the Navajo Reservation. And I was able to teach 15 years over probably an 18, 20-year period. I took some breaks of Native American kiddos. And we had the spectrum of white kids that were, their parents were engineers and they moved to this area because they loved it, down to third or fourth generation ranching kids whose probably parents probably had a 6th grade education. The whole spectrum, different years. And also with the Native American kids, the full spectrum from very, very traditional families that still observe, 12-year-old girls doing there's very specific rituals that they do when girls get their first period, and go to the powwows, to, Indian families that walk in wearing Indiana Chief baseball caps and t-shirts about Indian motorcycles and crack jokes with you. And I think that's one important thing to remember, is that Native Americans are not one stereotype. There are people just like you and me. They have different traditions, they have different ideas, and they have different traditions, and they have different ideas within their tribe. It's like the Amish. They're actually conservative Amish that don't ever go near electricity, and there are pretty contemporary Amish sects that have telephones at the end of their driveways. And we just, stereotyping is always a bad thing. But it was just a really cool experience for me. I had the freedom to make any kind of an art program I wanted. I will share, it's probably just something not to share like in one big slice. It's probably something to share over, multiple, when a subject comes up that is relatable to my memories of teaching these kids. I think I'll share it instead of trying to do it in one episode. Once I said, was there a story that kind of helps illustrate what the experience? Oh, before I say that, definitely, and I might get into this in a more detail. I grew up in northern Colorado. In suburbia, in a very white community. I had heard about this rural school because the Denver Post thought it was an interesting, lifestyle piece. So they would feature stories about this one-room schoolhouse. It had a teacher that, that did the 4-H, and I think she was a teacher down there for 40 years. But I had heard about it. It was just kind of a pride of joy of Colorado. But I grew up in suburbia, and so I did have a little bit, there is what they call them, socialites. They're the do-gooders, and I've kind of had that attitude that, grow up somewhere else and then they come to, save lesser people. Probably the best well-known story of that is Christie, Catherine Marshall, which is one of the books I love. I loved it as a kid. I read it. It certainly was in the back of my brain. of, she was a well-to-do Midwesterner and had the opportunity to go down and teach the Appalachia. My daughter's down. It's like an apple. I throw an apple at you. Appalachia children in the hollows. Was it Tennessee, Missouri? That whole area. I should know what state she was in. But it's just that outsider coming in, thinking that they have the solutions to the problems, and I certainly had that going on. Another good book, the same idea, is called Tessa, and one of my friends in college introduced it to me, and that was her inspiration. Again, grew up where I did, and then wanted to come down and teach the Indian children. But that was called Tessa, and that was about again a socialite who goes up to Alaska. I think Alaska or the Yukon or Canada. I read that like a very long time ago, and kind of gets her eyes opened. I mean, the reality of both these stories and me is getting your eyes open to these are people just like us, and they have more to teach you than you have to teach them. And I certainly have learned a lot working with them, and consider it a really big privilege of what I have been taught and learned and experienced. But teaching art to them was a hoot. Probably one of the funnest illustrations to say to kind of get to understand was I always did art. Some years I did music. I actually accompanied, we had a Christmas program, and one of the Navajo teachers taught all the children how to sing Silent Night in Navajo, and I have accompanied on the piano Silent Night to Navajo. Story. But one of the funniest was I would cover some years I was there 1 day a week, some years I was there 3 days a week. It was probably not, I think I'd never have done 4 days a week. But sometimes I was a teacher assistant, and I would cover recess. And the funniest story was watching this little Ute boy. I mean, big brown eyes, chubby cheeks, dark skin, dark hair, wearing jeans and cowboy boots, and then his little friend who was a white ranch kid. And they are fighting, arguing with each other about who's going to be the cowboy and who's going to be the Indian. I'm not joking. And they both wanted to be the Indian that day. And so to see this little you guy, I want to be the cowboy, you be the Indian. So they picked their part, and then they ran around, and you cannot keep a boy from designing and making a bow and arrow or a gun. I have seen little boys chew peanut butter and jelly sandwiches into the shape of a gun. Or, I mean, this is like desert, rural school. It's in the middle of nowhere. This is not a town. It's just a canyon of ranches and then a little allotment with a school on it. It now has multiple buildings. It's not just a one-room schoolhouse anymore. I taught in the teacherage, which was like when the teacher lived there, that's where she lived. But yeah, they would make, they could find dead branches and turn them into anything. But the day that the little Ute boy and the little very pasty white little ranch boy were arguing about who was going to be the cowboy and who was going to be the Indian. So there's one story of me teaching those kids. I got a lot more. So my husband always took the kids when I needed a break, and I just worked down there. I think it started like a half a day. The enrollment would go up and down. I probably went through four or five administrations, 4 or 5 different parent boards. Somebody, there were issues like there always is in charter schools, and it would kind of change philosophies every 4 or 5 years. I'm pretty proud that through all the politics, which you just get in a community run school, I was able to teach there for 15 years. I think my students would probably say I was mean, but I was disciplined. I I had 3 rules. You don't talk when I talk. If you're going to talk, once I give an assignment, you guys can chat while you're making art, but you can't not, if your hands aren't moving, then you can't talk. But if you're working and not just, disrupting other people or entertaining other people so they just have stopped working to listen to you, if everyone's working, you guys can talk. And then my third one was just because of me, you can't tap me. Like it makes me jump. And then of course the little kindergartners thought that was hilarious. So of course I got tapped a lot and they laughed and thought that was funny. But I am on the more strict end of the spectrum, which I love. This is what cracks. Like I would bump into my students later and they would, first of all, the fact they can tell me I'm mean. It's like my kids. My kids are like, oh, you're so strict. And I'm like, okay, well, if I really was extremely strict or extremely mean, you wouldn't be coming up and telling me that. Like, so right there, I'm not too worried. But these students will come up and I've had this more than one time. They'd be like, Miss Julia, you were the meanest teacher I had. And then they pause and they go, I love art. And I'm like, well, again, you love art? So again, I must not have been so horrible, but I was strict, and I think one of the reasons why I stopped teaching, and I got to be careful, this isn't going to turn into 3-hour long thing about our education system. I think one of the reasons I finally decided that era was done for me is I think there was some kind of a shift in education where children were not as encouraged to be respectful to teachers. Let's just put it that way, from their families. Children are not as encouraged to respect elders, to respect no foul language on the playground, there are ways to get them to be like, well, yes, you do have to sit here, and yes, you do have to do your math exercise or whatever. And then the support of the parents has changed. And I should probably just stop there. My reasons why I've stopped working in education. So future, I am going to continue. Now I've gone around this corner where my floss is, where my magazine racks are for my designs are that I'm working on. There's a red chair here you probably saw in this clip that's just piled high with things that have no place to go. So I have to organize that. And then the next thing is a cabinet that was my mother-in-law's, who was a phenomenal artist. My husband grew up with an artist who had a studio, and then he married an artist. But that's pretty well organized. I need to organize a little bit on the inside, but I'll show that the next time. And then we'll just keep moving around the room, see how far I get. So I think that, next time. So, 2 things before I say next time. I want to highlight other stitchers, floss tubers, and designers, but I kind of want to do it on a theme. And for sure, this week's thing that popped up while I've been listening to FlossTube working is the Peacock, Unicorn, and Badger chart that I don't think is a new chart. I'm pretty sure that as a Scarlet House that did it. I'll put all, like right now, all this information is there. But there's been multiple, it has come up as being stitched by multiple floss tubers for over a month. Like, this is not new. During the 12 by 12, I came across a new floss tuber that I watched. I really hope that I can go back in my history and find her. She's stitching it, but she had a link to, I want to say that it's like inspired by a very old chart that's in a museum. It's not an exact replica, but apparently, according to her, Rick Steves highlighted this tapestry or this embroidery in this museum. I don't know if that's how Scarlet House got the idea. I'm not sure. But I thought that was really interesting. So if you go down to my more, click on more, I will have all these people I'm talking about listed because I want to give credit where credit is due. The two sisters in California, one of them is stitching it. And I want to say her name's Becky, something or other. She's stitching it. And then the new thing, and I've highlighted them before, the new thing is Evertote, Carrie, and Caroline. They're stitching it. But Carrie, and I remember when I first saw this, in my head I thought, because it's a full coverage, and it has this gorgeous green yellowy background, which I love. I would stitch the full coverage. But I remember thinking to myself, wow, that would be a gorgeous dye color for someone to create in linen. Well, Carrie is a smart cookie, and Carrie did exactly that. So Carrie has dyed, and I can't remember any of these floss tubers' name, but I remember she named the color of this linen pub crawl. And it's like a yellowy green. And she says it's a really enjoyable stitch. And it's true. It's like just doing outside lines and filling in things. And I watched theirs this morning, or maybe it was last time. They've done two pretty close together. But she has done a greenish yellowy linen dye specifically for that project. And then Caroline is stitching it traditionally. So if you have fallen in love with that sampler, which has an interesting history that I will try and reconstruct in the notes, now I don't know like quantity, or if Carrie is doing like a pre-order. I can't remember. But yeah, but it's a gorgeous pattern, and apparently even Rick Steve is interested in it. So that's all cool. I mean, classic art never goes out of style. It just doesn't. And that's like when they're like, oh, so this color's kind of out of style now in your house. Well, you know what? If you did it right and it's good, it will never go out of style. So I wanted to tell you that. And then I wanted to say that next week I am going to try and adhere to, I kind of like this, a floss tube an artist tube floss tube in my studio. This is just what I'm up to on Friday, flip-flopping with more of an educational offering. Like last week I did the playlist. So my playlist for my Heart Sachet is all up on Moonflower Musings playlist, and there'll be 7 videos with all the different stages of if you do want that. And then I'm also going to do just a stitch playlist. So like already in that stitch playlist, when I get an opportunity, it will have an Algerian eyelet, how like watching me explaining and then watching me stitch Algerian eyelets, bullion stitch, and couching stitch. And then this morning in the spring, I don't think this is like a real surprise, I did flower. I did one flower to figure out how I wanted to do it. I'm going to make more flowers on this design. But the flower is made up of French knot center. And if you go on my Instagram stories, you will see the flower I'm talking about. But the center is French knots. I'm going to do a playlist on how to make French knots. Bullion stitch is the petals. Stem stitch, which in reality, if you think about stem stitch, is actually the backside of back stitch. Think about that. And then chain stitch for the petals. So I'm going to break down that flower. So if you choose to finish the spring project with that flower, you'll have a video. So I'm going to do stuff like that, trading off. Oh, and then also, hopefully, I've started this video 3 or 4 times how to finish something in a cookie cutter, my method. Surely it will get up this time. You know, I almost had a Christmas one done, and then it kind of was past Christmas, and that seemed weird. Surely the spring one is not seasonal enough that it can't be up all the time. So yeah, hopefully some more how-to videos will be coming. But next week, my educational video, I'm going to start the series on the history of women's stitching. And I think I shared a little bit before, I just didn't know how to do it. Do you go to prehistoric time and you come forward? Do you start now and go backwards? And what I kind of realized, like, that knowledge that I have, and also, and believe me, this is not knowledge I got in art school. I had architecture and art history for 4 years. I mean, women's history of art would maybe fill a teacup if that's, I don't even want to go there. But I have continued to learn and research and, gain more information and read a lot of books, which I will put up here for you. But what I realized about that, and also what I just shared about working, teaching Native American kids and rural ranch kids, it needs to be by subject. So I have a subject that I'm going to just divide into subjects. And there's 3 parts to the history of women's stitching. So next week, I'm going to do that. And then I was debating, like, do I write a blog? Do I go on my website and write a very involved article with links to the books that I found the research in, and, images? And if I did that route, I wouldn't be stitching. I do want to get back into writing. That is the other half of me that I haven't really shared a lot. I love writing, which seems kind of ironic since, like I've shared, I'm a dyslexic, but thank God for word processors. They have opened up whole new worlds for me. I want to write. I don't know if I want to do this subject in that format. So I haven't quite decided. I think I'm going to point you towards the sources that I have read over and over again, if you're interested in more. And most of them are Audible books, to tell you the truth. So that'll be next week, is my beginning of my, and I finally decided on a title: History of Women's Stitching. So, by subject. Maybe that should be the full title. And then at the very bottom of my notes, I have the word probably with a bunch of underlines and an explanation point. So we'll see if that happens. But so I think that's everything. I need to do a little video of this, but I think I'm gonna go get lunch. And yeah, so I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and go check out the Peacock, Badger, and Unicorn, or whichever order it's in. And we will talk to you next time.